Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Sam Alexander with the news. On the community calendar, Our Lady of Serene Waters in Castle Rock is hosting a casino night at the Knights of Columbus Hall the last Friday of this month. But if you're looking for an excuse to visit the Rock sooner, you're in luck. Today is the grand opening of Needful Things. We hope to see you there. You are listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King book club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
And Benjamin Graham.
Why, hello, constant readers. Come in and sample our wares.
And hopefully you've guessed today, or you listened to our previous episodes, that we are covering another Patreon selection by Joel Jones, Needful Things, through chapter 7. And we have Josh leading our discussion.
Oh, guys, I'm so excited to get to this book. As we've talked about before, this was my first King book. So, and I know, Ben, you've read this. So do you remember where in your King reading you came across Needful Things?
It must have been fairly early because once I discovered the interconnectedness, I heard of the Castle Rock cycle. And I read them in order, except for Cujo for some reason. I skipped Cujo. But I read Dead Zone, Dark Half, and the novella Sundog, all of which play into this book.
Almost immediately, even.
Almost immediately in one of the coolest forewords to a book I've ever read.
Yes. Before we get to the foreword, and CM, just to reiterate, you have never read this book.
I haven't, and that has been a real problem for me in preparation for this episode, because normally I like to do a little bit of online research, see what other people think, see what I can find out about it that I might not have known or thought about, so that I have some talking points. And I was so terrified to do that because I didn't want to spoil anything. Like, there are names that come up, and I keep thinking, damn it, I know we've heard that. And I feel like we've heard it recently. Who the hell is it? What book is it from? And I also really, really wanted to keep reading past our stopping point. I picked the book up like 3 times just in one night. It was on my bedside table, and I was like, okay, no, put it down. Well, no, what if I just put it down. I enjoy it so much so far.
So insanely readable. Joel Jones, who is our Patreon subscriber who suggested this book, on Facebook said that this is a guilty pleasure of his. That's insane, Joel. This is a legitimately, sincerely amazing fucking book.
It feels like coming home again for me, this being my first book. It's so hard to explain, but let's, without any further ado, let's jump right in. Ben, you talked about the foreword. The foreword is so unique. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, right from the start. I love a Stephen King foreword. I mean, the constant readers. I love the feeling of him the talking to us.
Yeah.
The feel of a dialogue between King and his biggest fans. And that's almost what this is, except it is an unidentified person welcoming us back to Castle Rock. And we're sitting on the steps of the bandstand where it's kind of a tragedy we haven't read Dead Zone yet.
I really want to. I'm very excited.
It's such a good book because the bandstand plays a big part.
Oh.
This old man is just talking to you in the second I'm really bad at distinguishing first, second, third person. But he's talking to you and saying, hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. You've been here before. But things are going just right and dandy. And he is pointing out the people of the town and giving you the little inside scoop about what they're like and the little David Lynchian, like, here's the underbelly of what's going on.
The slight grudges that people have.
Do we know that he's an old man? Does it say that?
No, but
Because-
in my head, he's just an old, wise old
Yeah,
man.
because young men don't know all these things about everybody in the town. It's Stephen King.
Yeah,
It's Stephen
exactly.
King, yeah.
In my mind, it's present day Stephen King.
Yep.
Which obviously, and this was written in 1991, it would have been younger Stephen King. But in my head, it's present day wise old man Stephen King.
Yeah. This local John that we get concludes with him announcing that there's a new store opening, and that store is Needful Things. And we meet Brian Rusk. Brian Rusk is an 11-year-old boy who knows a lot about awnings, and we spend a lot of time on that. But most importantly, Brian Rusk is the first customer of Needful Things.
No, most importantly, Stephen King made me read some very explicit fantasies and wet dreams of an 11-year-old boy. And I'm trying to figure out how I feel about that.
It's not great.
But spoiler alert, I was an 11-year-old boy, and spot on.
Well,
Nailed it.
And I assumed that I was just, detached because I was never an 11-year-old boy. Maybe someday. I aspire,
Some of the I'm not going to get into it now, but some of the sexual elements of this book, of all things, are some of the things that I have memories of. We'll get to it.
The sex is very explicit and intense every time it happens.
Okay, I'm just going to say this now so we can be done with it and get it out of the way and I don't have to talk about it later. Women do know what amazing orgasms are by their own hand before some fucking man has to show them what it's like. It's fine.
But women can't lift themselves up by the clitoris with one hand.
Jeez.
But that's jumping way ahead. I can't wait to spend an hour on that scene. Brian Rusk goes by the store and he sees that yesterday it said it was opening soon, but today he walks by and it says that it's open. So he goes inside and we meet the proprietor, Leland Gaunt. He is tall, old with a kind face, a charming smile, and his first and second fingers are exactly the same length, which I feel like that means something.
It comes up again.
It comes up a lot.
It comes up constantly. It's one of those things that's like just meant to be a weird, like ominous portent, but also it's just such a weird detail that you're like, okay.
It's like if you were not human, but you were making like a human suit, you might not pay attention to all your fingers being the different length.
Am I okay?
You're fine.
Okay.
CM is holding up her hand to show us she has lines and her fingers are all different lengths.
But these details about Leland Gaunt are very mundane. My favorite details about Leland Gaunt. First, everyone perceives his eye color as different. When Brian Rusk sees his eyes, he sees the deep blue of Miss Ratcliffe, his speech therapy teacher's eyes, who he is having these fantasies about. And they just draw him in. And the counterbalance is that people are repulsed by his touch. And I love those two so supernatural, so creepy things. It's so great.
Yeah, the first time, I forget who it is that comes in, and after Brian like goes on about how blue this guy's eyes are, and the next people come in and say his green eyes were beautiful. I was like, oh shit, that's really cool.
Can I ask you guys a question or admit a fear? Maybe, I'm not sure which.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Reading about Leland Gaunt for the first time, I think, and I know this is going to come back to bite me. It's not going to be good because I've already seen some warning signs. He's so cool. He's so cool.
Yeah.
Leland Gaunt is one of my favorite King villains. He's charming in the way that I feel like King wanted Straker to be charming.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it works here.
I did keep thinking about that, Salem's Lot. But I love that he tells people, enter freely and leave some of the happiness you bring. He's got to be a good guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you know who I want to play Leland Gaunt? Paul Rudd. Honest to God.
Okay,
He's
that
he's so charming, but he can go dark, but the entire time you see him, you're like, what a good dude. Everybody naturally likes this guy.
That is interesting stunt casting.
Thank you.
See, here's my problem with that is I know exactly in my brain what he looks like. My high school choir director, Mr. May. Exactly. And because you two and the rest of the world that is listening to this have no idea what
Nope.
Mr. May looks like.
He looks like Leland Gaunt.
He looks like G-Man, the guy on the cover of Half-Life 2.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm on board.
Yeah,
I'm fully on board for this.
See, for CM, who is still looking at me confused, he looks like a scary old man. The end.
So Brian goes around after he meets Leland Gaunt and he shows him the things in the store because nobody knows what is inside Needful Things. Brian is the first person inside, so he's seeing these display cases half empty, but other really cool items. There's a geode, there's a picture of Elvis.
Also, Brian is not our main character.
No,
he is not, but he's our main character for this first chapter pretty much.
We also, before this, we get some really cool small town flavor in the form of Cora Rusk, his mother.
Oh my God.
Is Steven's mom okay?
Yeah, it is the same mom's archetype that we've seen over and over again. She's not as controlling as Mrs. Kasparak or something like that, but she's just constantly shoving food in her face and watching TV and having loud conversations with her best friend about how this store is probably just a junk store, but it's hiding how incredibly interested these busybodies of Castle Rock are.
Yeah,
I love that.
When Leland is saying that Brian is going to be the best advertisement he can get by being his very first customer. So he's going to give him a special price on anything he wants. And this is when we get our first supernatural piece of property in the shop is he holds this wood splinter. Sam, do you want to tell us about the splinter?
The splinter is supposedly a relic from Noah's Ark. I will just say it. Yeah.
He says,
doesn't come right out and say that.
He's like, I can't say it's from Noah's Ark, but
It's from around that time, and it was found nearby where they say the Ark landed.
Yeah.
And so he hands it to Brian, and he doesn't even want to touch it, which would be me. I'd be like, oh, if that's super old, don't put it near me. I don't want to break it and have to buy it. And the moment that this petrified piece of wood touches his hand, he is transported. I think of it sort of like VR. Somebody put a thing over his head and he can feel the waves and smell the salt from the ocean. And he's taken to the actual boat that this piece of wood came from. And he's totally absorbed in it. And when he comes out of this hallucination, fantasy, I don't quite know what to call it, he doesn't run away screaming. Which, if that happened, I mean, that's not something that happens to you. If that happened, how would you guys react to that? Would you be like, oh, that's cool. Do you have any baseball cards?
No, I'd definitely be like, what the fuck?
I'd have a million questions for
Yeah.
Did you guys have the same experience when you were reading it and, he closes his eyes and he's giving you all the context clues of, oh, you're on a boat and you're following and I hear birds chirping. Yep, that's on a boat. I'm moving up and down. Yeah, I'm on a boat. I hear lions roar. Wait, what? I had stopped. And I'm like, oh, well, hold on.
No, I got that.
Yeah.
It works with he's on Noah's Ark. I get it.
Or he's on what was that? Never mind. With the guy and the tiger on the boat. I didn't watch it.
Yogi's Ark.
No, the live action
The
one.
really bad 80s
The guy
cartoon.
and the tiger.
Peter Potamus was there. Never mind.
That was the name. Peter Potamus was there. After all of this, Leland says that he knows his inventory so well. None of these items are going to be great for Brian. So what does he want?
Life of Pi. And now I have to keep all of that in.
Good pull. Good pull, CM.
I'm glad he wanted a copy of Life of Pi autographed by the tiger. Leland doesn't have that, so he settles for a Sandy Koufax card. Brian collects 1956 baseball cards. It's something his dad got him into, and he wants a Sandy Koufax card so bad. And guess who just happens to have one? And not only does he happen to have one, but it's autographed. And it specifically says on the card, "To my good friend Brian, with best wishes, Sandy Koufax."
After he has this experience with the petrified wood, I definitely expected Leland to be like, he signed this to you. But he doesn't play it that way.
No.
Instead, he's like, oh, isn't this just like an amazing happenstance? You know, the kid who got this autographed was also named Brian. It just makes it more special to you.
Yeah.
Which is so cool.
Yes, it's such a cool detail that gives you the ominous otherworldly feeling of like, this is too perfect without it being outright supernatural.
Yeah.
It shows you how crafty Leland is.
He never, even with the splinter, he never acknowledges that anything happened to Brian. He's just, oh, isn't that a cool thing you just held? And plays it completely straight as though he's not fully aware of the effect of these things. Gaunt tells him that he can buy it, and the price is half and half. It's half cash and half deed. So he sells the card to Brian for 85 cents, but then asks him if he knows Wilma Jerzyk. And when he says yes, Gaunt continues to talk, but Brian fades away. You can tell he's coming under some sort of hypnosis, and the next thing he knows, he's being shoved out onto the street saying, "Thanks for coming by." And he has the card, so he knows he made some sort of deal.
I also love that it's a mystery for us with Brian what happens, but very soon we do get to know what that's like when Leland puts somebody under his spell, which is really, really cool.
Next, we get to meet who is going to be one of our main characters, Polly. Ben, do you want to talk about Polly a little bit?
Polly runs the local sewing shop, You Sew and So,
God, I
which
love
is
that name.
really gentleman please level
Gentlemen,
shop naming.
Please.
She has extremely bad arthritis in her hands, which leads me to I need a name for this because it's the same thing I had with Bobby Anderson. When I first read this book, Polly in my head was an old woman.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too.
She's 43. That is not old at all.
It's the arthritis. I think.
Well, yeah, it's the arthritis for the most part. I just pictured her as this, and she runs a sewing shop.
Well,
That's
she's
an old
had
lady.
Yeah, it's an
thing.
old lady thing.
She's had a life, though, before all of this. So I think that ages people in your head a little bit, too.
Yeah. But anyway, she's not an old woman. She's just this woman that runs the local sewing shop. She is someone that the townspeople don't know how to feel about because they don't know how do they put it? They don't know if she's from here or from away.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was raised in Castle Rock and left at 17 because she was pregnant. And a few years ago, she came back without the baby, and no one knows why.
She's also someone who breaks all of the small town rules that are just sort of inherent in most small towns, and everybody, unspoken thing, they all agree that they're going to adhere to these rules, and she just does her thing. So I love her.
Oh yeah, Polly kicks ass.
She's a Ruth.
They spend time talking about, on opening day of Needful Things, the rules of small towns and new shops. How no one wants to be first to get there, no one wants to be last to leave, and you never bring a cake. And Polly comes to the store as soon as it opens with a cake. Immediately, you're like, I love her. What a great character.
Like this, she clearly does not give a fuck about these social constructs, and like she's here to live her fucking life.
And I don't know when it is we find this out, but there's one other very important and interesting thing to know about Polly Chalmers. she is currently dating a character we've met before.
Yeah. Oh my. Okay.
Sheriff Alan Pangborn.
Yeah!
There's so much dark half stuff in
There
this.
really
I
is.
didn't expect that.
Well, there's so much they're dropping references to, like I said, all the previous Castle Rock stories. They talk about Frank Dodd, spoiler alert, who was a serial killer in
Insomnia?
no.
No. Dead Zone.
In Dead Zone. They talk about Cujo, who killed the previous sheriff, George Bannerman. Who have we met George Bannerman in
No.
one of the
It
stories we've
sounds
read
very.
yet?
His name sounds familiar.
And maybe they referenced him in the Dark Half, but we never
Yeah.
met him.
Okay. And then I don't know if you guys have read this, but they keep referencing how the Emporium Galorium, run by Pop Merrill,
Yeah.
uncle or grandfather of Ace Merrill,
Yeah.
who is the villain from
Stand by.
Stand
Me.
By Me,
Or the body. I guess.
or the body,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh.
burned down, and that happened in the novella The Sundog from 4 Past Midnight.
And Homer Gamanch.
Yep, they mentioned Homer Gamanch
The-
getting beaten to death with his own
Oh,
arm,
Yep.
Yeah.
and Norris being somebody who pukes at crime scenes, which was just
Yeah, all of that. This book is almost a central book. This
does
is
it gracefully,
This is
though.
one of the, what do they call them? The keystone
Yeah.
books. Yeah, if you're getting into the Dark Tower or have read the Dark Tower, you need to read Needful Things. Especially later on, there's some no spoilers.
CM's
but
mind is going to be
there's
blown by
some
the end of this
stuff.
book. I'm so excited.
It's so hard.
Usually, you guys get to watch me freak out, and I'm just so excited for the tables to get turned on
like,
CM.
So for the rest of this episode, can you guys just sort of tell me
No,
about?
no,
Damn it.
no.
Okay.
I haven't read this in also like 15 years, so
it is so weird the things that have come back to me as I've been reading them.
Same.
There's a point we're going to get to a little bit later, and I'll point it out. But Polly comes into the shop and is taken in by Leland's hazel eyes, and she's kind of really enamored with him right away. And she said she doesn't really warm up to people immediately, but she just is so on board for him right away.
Is he younger looking after Brian's experience? Because I swear there was a part where Brian describes him as like an old dude. And I mean, to an 11-year-old kid, a
Yeah,
lot of
that's what
people
I was
I
probably
think
thinking.
look
that's what
old.
it is.
But the way, like his hair and stuff, he seemed elderly and frail. And Polly's like, well, if I didn't have the sheriff in my bed, I'd jump this guy's bones.
Yeah, I think it extends further than just his eyes, that maybe there's just something about when you look at him, you see what you would
Okay,
trust.
because I was thinking, okay, is this like he's getting energy from these experiences and he is getting, like, he's regaining his youth? Or is he just appearing slightly different based on what people
I think
see?
it's all illusionary.
Okay.
So Leland very tactfully pumps Polly for information about all these people in town, and he has this notebook and he's writing down all these details. And she points out also that none of his objects in the store have prices, and that's when he says something that I think is so amazing. He basically says that anything worth buying is worth dickering over, because there are people who are defining worth by need. And that's just such a cool way to sum up how he runs his shop. It seems so innocent. This guy just wants to dicker with people about the prices, but in reality, it's something so much more nefarious. They wrap up, and Polly assures him, by the end of the day, trust me, there's going to be plenty of people coming through. Don't you worry. And sure enough, there are. He sells a few odds and ends to people as they come in. The interaction with Cindy Rose. What do you guys think about Cindy Rose? She buys the vase.
Oh, yeah. It's cool seeing him just running the shop, because there are two very different Leland Gaunts. Because there's the public face, where there's these moments where just people come in and shop like normal, and he's just a very charismatic man who's good at bartering, which is really fascinating. She finds this very fancy vase that the more she looks at it, the more she thinks, I need this. It would look so good in my house. And they go back and forth on it. And when she leaves, she's like, oh, I got him.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone leaves thinking, I just got the best deal of
Yeah.
my entire life, whether it's one of his special deals or not, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like he's so good at what he does. He could just have a legit business. He doesn't have to be evil.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but I think that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. Is that you? Am I using that right?
yeah, I think so.
The selling stuff is a means to the evil end, rather than the
I
other
just
way
don't want
around.
him to
Right.
be
If
bad.
he couldn't be doing the evil stuff, I don't think he'd want to sell anything.
Ugh.
He'd lose a taste for it. But he meets Nettie Cobb, who we've only at this point kind of gotten reference to, who made the cake and loves carnival glass. And he invites her back to the shop for another day to like, oh, I have some beautiful stuff I want you to come look at.
We should describe Nettie Cobb before we move
Yeah.
on,
Her
'cause
whole
she's-
thing, the way King describes her and then sets up this glass, and then what you find out fucked me up.
She is okay. So a thing I love about this book is the pacing is perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. The way he sets everything up is so intricate. We've had a lot of books with a lot of characters. And a lot of the time that gets in the way because there's so many characters that none of them get really to feel like people, you
Yeah.
know? But this book has maybe more characters than any of them, but they are all so well defined. You feel like you know all of them. And Nettie Cobb is one of my favorite characters.
She's outstanding. She's this kind of quiet, kind of mousy lady that everyone knows there's something off about Nettie, and everyone kind of they kind of steer clear of her a little bit, and they make a big deal about that. Polly has like really kind of taken her under her wing, and she cleans the store, and it just, at first you're just kind of led to believe that this is a lady down on her luck, and Polly is kind of taking her in, and it's very sweet and very innocent. Same thing with her love of this carnival glass. Later, we find out that she stabbed her husband, who was an abusive asshole, in the throat with a fork and spent some years in Juniper Hill.
And Polly got her out.
Mm-hmm.
She helped her with her mortgage. She gave her a job. She helped her get back on her feet. The stabbing her abusive husband thing, it was so cool because when that comes out, you're like, oh, because you're just picturing this very meek person who you know is scared for a reason, but you don't know why. And I don't know, I just feel like, yeah, if your husband's like that, just fucking stab him in the throat with a meat fork.
She's such a sympathetic character, and another of many characters in this book that I have perfectly cast.
Yeah.
The woman who plays Yoga Jones from Orange is the New Black.
Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
I've only seen the first season.
I don't think she's in the first season. She's just this very skinny, a little bit of an older woman. She also voices Patty Mayonnaise from Doug. And that's just her speaking voice. So imagine that.
Yeah. And at the end of this scene, we get to see the other side of the Nettie Cobb coin, because Wilma Jerzyk, who we learned about earlier, walks in.
Played by the mom from Malcolm in the Middle.
Yes!
I'm good
Oh
at this,
my
guys.
God, you're so good at this. We need to get all these pictures together and put our cast list up. And I love that as soon as Leland sees Wilma Jerzyk, he knows it's her. I believe he describes her face as like a shovel. And like Cora Rusk and Myra Evans have shown up, and they're looking at stuff, mainly the photograph of Elvis. But he describes that those two women are fat. And Wilma
Of course
Jerzyk,
he had to mention it.
Wilma Jerzyk is kind of the same size, but she's like a lumberjack. Like she's an Annie Wilkes. She is Wilma Jerzyk
Yep.
through and through.
I did
just-
not imagine her as fat at all. I imagined her, this is some narrow casting, but visually, the final Pam. Don't worry about it.
All right.
There's going to be some listeners that are like, fuck, that's awesome.
Send us an email if that's you. Next, we finally get back with Alan Pangborn in our next chapter. How good did it feel to be back with Alan Pangborn?
I love him. He is so cool.
Alan has become something different than we knew him in the Dark Half. We find out that his wife and son and the youngest son have died. We don't find out just right now, but we know they've passed.
But it's fucking tragic.
Oh God. And as he's coming home, he's coming back to the station. He's had a few drinks from being up in court, and he finds the can with a compressed snake in it that his son bought from a joke shop. And there's this moment, I wrote this down because I love it so much. He says, with the dead, there's always one more thing you find that brings you back to them. That no matter how much getting the stuff out of the house, like you're always going to find something. And he has that inner voice that is constantly be like, hey, don't forget, wife and kid are dead. In case you forgot for a split second, I'm here to remind you.
How did you guys feel about that the inner monologue?
I could have done without it.
Yeah. Because we've said it once and we'll say it again. King writes grief so well.
Yeah.
And with the moment when he finds this, you can feel his heart just like breaking. And then there's this jovial voice that's like mocking him that does not fit the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it really jarring and distracting.
Yeah, the grief is already so clear. We don't need the reminder that he is constantly remembering because we can see it in his actions. Then we get to the station and, God, this is a terrible phrase that is stuck in my head. But he sees Buster Keaton's car parked in the crypt space, as he constantly refers to it.
Yeah, there's a few instances of pretty problematic language.
Yeah,
it's 1991.
It's 1991, but it's so weird. Like, it's only mentioned this one time, and it is a phrase that has stayed in my head because when I read this growing up, I was so jarred by it at the time that it took me by like I knew it was coming and it still hit me. It's a lot. We get to meet Norris Ridgwick again back at the station. And we start the dance between Pangborn and Buster because he's parked in the handicap space and he tells Norris to ticket his car. And Norris, rightfully so, what we find out about Buster is scared shitless to do it. What did you think, CM, about Alan's plan?
I actually liked his plan. I thought it was really good, and it illustrated how well he knows the town and his ability to... The impression I got is that he can be a good sheriff, but he can also play the political game. And sometimes, I guess he feels like he has to play that game to be able to be that good sheriff. So he is telling Norris, who's very resistant to this idea, it's going to be okay. It's only a $5 ticket. And he's going to be all mad and he's going to demand that I get rid of this ticket. And I will. And then he's going to owe me.
Alan is just extremely competent and good at his job, which is very endearing, even though his job sucks.
After he gets all settled in and Buster gets his car ticketed, he gives Polly a call, and he can tell by the tone of her voice that she has had to take painkillers. Something that when we talked about Polly's arthritis, when she meets Leland, she shows him her hands immediately because they describe her hands as misshapen in her gloves because of how severe her arthritis is.
This is such an insane moment. So I don't know if anybody out there has something that they, like maybe a physical thing or just something about them that they feel is this obvious, horrible defect. And so for Polly, she wanted to just get that out there right away. Like, you know what? I'm going to show him my hands. It's not going to be this thing. I'm just going to put it out there and then it's not going to be an issue. We can move on. I get that. You just want to tell that person, okay, this is the most horrible thing. And then we can move on from it. And we don't have to make it a part of our interaction and our exchange.
Yeah. That's why you showed us your tail the first time we came in to record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that weird.
Yeah, it's not that weird. What's weird is Ben's gills.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Hey.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be judgmental.
Are you the deep?
something that Alan contends with in this dealing with Polly's arthritis is that he has a hard time kind of approaching it because he doesn't want to like call her out for taking meds and then her saying, "Oh, it's not that bad," and he knows full well she's lying about it.
I want to reread those sections after finishing that last chapter.
We later find out that there are very strong parallels
Yeah.
between Polly and his
Deceased wife.
Deceased wife. I wanted to say ex-wife, and that's not the same thing.
Yeah. So instead of pushing it, he just casually talks to her. She fills him in about needful things, about Leland Gaunt, and makes a big deal about Nettie is willing to go back by herself to see Leland because he has this carnival glass. And this is when we get a glimpse into the Nettie Cobb, Wilma Jerzyk feud. This feud is dark. They're neighbors.
Mhm.
They like share like a backyard. So they're not like next door, but there's a little ways between them. And Nettie got a puppy, and that puppy was barking. And Wilma lost her goddamn mind about it. She called the cops several times. She called Nettie screaming. She at one point even said if the dog barked one more time, she would come over and slit its throat.
We should talk about Wilma Jerzyk.
Yes, let's do that.
She is a lunatic. She is, I love the way they describe her, is she views her entire life as a series of battles. Everything. She's married to Pete Jerzyk, who she says marriage is a lifelong series of battles and she will win. She has complete disdain for her husband and uses him as just like a Roomba, basically. Which made the chapter where we find out a little more about Pete all the funnier, honestly. I thought, I guess drugging people isn't usually described as funny.
You guys, the relationship between them is just dripping misery.
Oh, yeah.
We have the drugging. We have the way he views her. He loves her like people love their goddess that they worship. Their, this destructive power that treats them well, but that at any moment could destroy them for no reason. It's so cool. I kept thinking of Annie Wilkes.
Pete and Wilma Jerzyk are if misery had actually been a love story.
If it had a happy ending?
Yeah.
Here's the difference between Annie Wilkes and Wilma Jerzyk, though, that I think is very important. And that's that Wilma is a bully.
Yes.
Annie, there were redeeming qualities. We never got in her head to know her train of thought. We get in Wilma's head a few times, and it's terrible.
We find out that she wasn't even really that annoyed by the puppies barking. This was just something to keep her going.
Yeah.
She just likes to have a battle to focus on.
I believe at one point they say something like, people like Wilma can smell weakness, and Nettie reeks of it.
Yeah.
And so she's just such an easy target to tear apart, and she loved torturing her. Next, we meet Hugh Priest. And Hugh Priest is a character I want to talk about because this is the moment I had where I remembered, something very important. When he stumbles drunkenly in front of Needful Things, it talks about him looking at the window. And before it says it, I was like, foxtail. For some reason, the image of him looking in the window with this foxtail is so amazing.
The foxtail is something, his story arc is another one that stuck in my mind from reading it before.
It's because it's insane. It's the first time I feel like we really see an example of the power of the shop.
Yes.
Because he sees this foxtail in the window, and it reminds him of when he was a teenager and he was taking his dad's car out for the first time, and he had his friends with him, and the top was down. He was riding on the highway, and there was a foxtail tied to the antenna.
That looks exactly like
it. And it takes him back to this time because he's an alcoholic and he just has a bad life and he's kind of a piece of crap.
Yes.
Takes him back to this time where life was good. And so he now feels like when he looks at this, and this is what got me, because of course, our Tommy Knockers thing with the alcoholism and the stuff I've gone through recently, he has this thought where he's like, if I could just have that foxtail, I would be okay. I could go up to a meeting, an AA meeting in the next town, and I could get sober. I could put this on my pickup, and I'm too old to change, but I'm not too old to try to change. And you feel that moment for him.
It makes what he becomes even more sad, and it's the first instance of seeing that the needful things that needful things sell is more than haunted stuff. It's more than that. It's a curse.
Yeah, it's destructive. It was also cool the way we saw Leland interact with him, because that was kind of shattered my romantic vision of this amazing shop owner.
Yeah, when he feels he's hypnotized, when he comes inside and he's having this conversation, when he goes to reach for his wallet, Leland loses his mind. And he's like, people think that money and souls are what is important. What do I want with your money or your soul? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, he basically says, your soul is garbage to me. I don't fucking care about you at all.
So,
which is terrifying because
amazing.
what is important?
yeah. What I love about this chapter is we go from this moment of Hugh Priest finding his needful thing, and then we cut over to Brian Rusk, who's having a wet dream where he has to write. He writes, "I will finish paying for my Sandy Koufax card," and he has to write it 500 times on the board. His teacher's given him a handy, and then it turns out to be Wilma Jerzyk. We've all been there.
Yep.
But this is the moment that greatly foreshadows what Hugh Priest is going to go through, is because when he wakes up, he becomes obsessed with checking on the card. He wanted to show it to his dad, but then he was worried his dad would ask too many questions. He doesn't want to show it to anybody like you would if you'd actually naturally found it. He's so protective and obsessive about it. It's the first time through, this slipped by me completely, and because it's just a prelude of what is going to happen to Hugh.
He knows that there's something not right about how he got his hands on that card, even though he's only an 11-year-old boy.
It's a running theme throughout the rest of the book of getting what you think you need, but what is the use of getting what you need if it can't be used in a good, productive way?
The next day, Nettie goes to Needful Things for her appointment. Ben, do you want to talk about what happens with Nettie?
Nettie actually gets up the nerve to go to Needful Things. And we see this through the eyes of Polly and Rosalie working at You So-and-so across the street. And also, Polly makes a real fun orgasm joke.
I'm not sure if she even knows what one is.
Despite
If a
the
man
fact that
hasn't
later
given it to
on,
her.
she has never had one, I guess, until she gets an above the pants HJ.
Oh my god.
It was interesting to see Nettie's struggle to even walk into the front door of the shop. They watch her just like stop and start and stop and then look around like she didn't want anybody to see her.
Yeah, Rosalie even says she wanted to go out and encourage her. And then she stops because she's like, no, she'd just run away.
Yeah.
When she finds the piece of carnival glass, Leland hands it to her. It's this lampshade, and she's so excited about it, and she walks away with it, and you're having this like happy moment. And then as she's walking away, it's like, oh, this is the exact one I had that my husband broke before I killed him.
The thing that basically was like the final straw that drove her to kill him. It was just so cool.
Either you guys have to Google what carnival glass was.
100% I did.
Okay.
My grandma has milk glass, so
Oh,
she's
okay.
obsessed with it. I just kept picturing milk glass.
I don't know that they're the same or different.
No idea.
Let's Google.
Well, I didn't
Ben,
Google
let's
carnival
Google milk
glass, so
We'll Google milk glass.
I'll
You Google
Google
carnival glass. Then we cut back over to the police station, and we find out the aftermath of that ticketing. Buster gets ready to beat the shit out of Norris over a $5 parking ticket.
Cannot wait until we get more Buster.
Buster's such a piece of shit.
This is, I think, the last we see of Buster in this 7 chapters that we read. But there is something wrong with Buster Keaton. Hilarious nickname, by the way.
It is really great. Danforth Buster Keaton.
Danforth Buster Keaton. Everyone calls him Buster behind his back.
Because he's being persecuted.
And this is another such of a king archetype. The person who is, as Nettie Cobb would say, a person in authority who is secretly losing his mind.
Mm-hmm. And later we find out that there's like a kind of a throwaway line that he has like schizophrenia runs in his family. Mm-hmm. And that's like a secret among the townspeople. And so you can tell that Buster's a ticking clock already. Yeah. So Alan comes in, he diffuses the situation, follows through with his plan, not the way he was hoping to, of basically making the deal of, hey, give us some budget considerations. And as soon as he solves one crisis, that's when Reverend William Rose comes in.
God damn. I mean, gotta a damma. I hated that.
Did either of you guys read it just for fun, like a crappy Italian stereotype?
No, I just heard Reverend Lovejoy's voice.
Ah, yeah.
Can you?
I feel like this is hardly worth it.
Oh my god.
No.
It's terrible.
Worth it.
Yeah. So Reverend Rose, and we find out about this in the opening a little bit, but there's a casino night that is going to be happening. The Catholics are putting on a casino night fundraiser, and the Baptists think that this is the devil. And they are working, the town is split in half. There are people wearing anti-casino night buttons. There are people putting up pro-casino night flyers. It is just the big thing in the town.
This was one of my favorite parts of the foreword. This is set up. They set up everything we've talked about so far. The old man on the steps points out Wilma Jerzik and says she's trouble. She's always angry, but he points out a flyer that's stapled to the bandstand and says, they're really up in arms at each other. It sets it up so neatly and lets you know this is going to be trouble.
Yeah, we're not letting this thread go. We cut away to Brian Rusk, who is finally committing his deed in Wilma Jerzik's backyard. But we'll come back to that shortly. But first, we're going to stop back at Needful Things because Myra Evans, the best friend of Cora Rusk, has decided she needs to buy this photo of the king before Cora can get to it.
This offends me on so many different levels.
This is one of the scenes in the book, like I said, of a sexual nature that stuck in my brain, not in a good way.
Oh boy. Okay, first of all, I am sorry. I hate Elvis. Not into the king. He's
not
a
an
perv.
Elvis?
Yeah, he likes young girls, and I appreciate that. Anyway.
Yeah, not a fan, personally.
So they're obsessed with Elvis and that whole culture, which is irritating. So she's trying to get this picture because she can't stand the thought of walking into Cora's home and seeing it hanging up on her mantle.
Yeah, they bring up multiple times, these are best friends.
Right. And so they have like this weird Elvis paraphernalia rivalry going on. And so she has to have this. And this is another one that Leland, he's been sort of charming and kind to everybody we like so far. But everybody who's kind of, his sort of, I guess his true colors come out and he's rude and kind of harsh with her. And he dickers with her. He knows exactly how much she can afford. And he keeps, she'll offer him 70 and he's like, you fat piece of shit. I know you can afford more than that. She's like, my husband will kill me. I'll have to write a check. He's like, I don't care what he does to you. Do you want this picture or not? And then he tells her to blow him.
There's a reason he specifically treats Myra like this, I believe.
Why?
She broke the rules. She showed up on one of the days, appointment only. She walks in with no appointment. So I believe she broke his rules of engagement, and so he gets mad, which is not a good excuse for yelling slob my knob at someone.
Gobble my crank.
Thank you.
It's both sides.
An important distinction.
But he does the same thing to Hugh Priest too. Like he gets angry at him, and he also showed up.
Yeah.
Holy shit, Ben!
Yeah,
that's awesome. What I do want to talk about the magic of this item is she holds this picture and she's suddenly on stage with
God,
Elvis.
that's gross too. It's also gross.
And it's
so
very
gross.
sexual, but I'm listening to the audiobook and Stephen King is narrating it.
Oh no!
So I need to share a moment with you.
Eyes closed, bosom heaving, legs tightening, loosening. Oh, Myra said, shaking like a bowl of jelly on a place. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Please stop.
Oh.
Well, that was something I never needed to fucking hear in my life. That was not good for my ears or brain.
I experienced it, so you had to experience it.
Good job, Steve.
Yeah, he fucking went for it. Anyway, Myra ends up leaving with this photo.
With no blowies
No
or
blowies.
slobbies.
Yeah,
But
he
a
lets her,
prank.
like, they say she scrabbles at his pants, and he just, like, bats her away. It's so dismissive and awful. It's
Well, his logic is sound. Oral sex gives him amnesia.
Okay.
I love that. It's like, that's a weird justification, but all right, cool. But what if it's true?
Oh, we know his weakness.
Big if true.
Yeah, Josh, don't spoil the final chapter for
Sorry,
our listeners.
my mistake. Now we get to the resolution, at least as far as we are here with Hugh Priest. Because we found out he's going to turn his life around. And he goes home and he's thinking about going to AA and he's very excited. He pulls the foxtail out. And the first thing he thinks about is, if I put this on my antenna, some kids are going to come rip it off and stomp on it and throw it in the gutter.
It is such an insane thought because no one gives a shit about that foxtail except for him. And obviously we as a reader see that, but he is so obsessed with it and so afraid of something happening to it that he locks it in a closet on the top shelf.
And thinks about how he needs to get a big, strong lock for that closet, and then he'll feel really safe.
And downs a bottle of black velvet while he does it.
And he drinks about it for a little
Why
bit.
did he have to hide it? He lives alone, I presume.
Because somebody could break in and get it.
No,
Kids don't
the
care about
bottle.
anything.
The bottle of
Oh,
booze.
the bottle.
He had to like rummage for it.
Probably because he's lying to himself.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's revisit Wilma Jerzyk and find out the results of Brian Rusk's deed. Wilma comes home and she asks offhanded what?
Sorry, I just thought she gets a little slap and tickle under the sheets.
Such an unpleasant phrase.
It works so perfectly.
It really did. She goes back to get the sheets off the line and they are caked in mud.
As she walks right into one and the muddy sheet just slaps her right across her face and chest and gets mud on her. And so she loses her shit spectacularly.
She falls to the ground and she's crawling back to the house. And in her madness, she hears a dog bark and her brain immediately says, this must have been Nettie. Nettie came and got revenge on me. And she cannot let that stand because it made her feel afraid for just a second. And so because she was made to feel afraid, she is going to destroy Nettie. Fun prank.
And speaking of pranks, ? This is when we find out the next chapter opens with Wilma Jerzyk didn't know her husband as well as she thought.
Oh,
Which
I love it.
is such a great line. We find out that Pete Jerzyk is deeply in love with his insane wife.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when she gets in a mood where she's going to kill someone, he slips her a little bit of a Mickey.
He got a Xanax prescription for his own health and then just drops it in her coffee. And then she mellows out.
I love the story that she had a feud with a hairdresser from a neighboring town. And it was the first time that he put Xanax in her coffee. And he woke up the next morning and she was like doing the dishes and singing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very funny visual because from everything we know about Wilma Jerzyk so far, that I never would have imagined that.
No.
It's so sad because he can't talk to her about it. He can't say, hey, I slipped you a Xanax. Look how it helped you. You should get a prescription and feel better.
Because she sees drugs as weakness. So she'll handle life on life's terms.
Yeah.
Like goddamn trooper.
She's like one of those ladies that has a bumper sticker. It's like, grab life by the balls.
She does have a bumper sticker that says, don't like my driving, call 1-800-EAT-SHIT.
Yeah. That is great. She has kind of calmed down from murder, but has since decided that she is going to make Nettie take care of herself. So she drives around her house. She honks when she drives by. She just keeps making these loops.
She pulls into her drive and sits for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so Nettie is obviously losing her fucking mind, and Nettie has to go to work.
She's losing her mind for like 2 reasons, though.
Yeah.
Because this is where we find out, too, a little bit more similar to Hugh's issue. Nettie is obsessed with this carnival glass. And once she kind of gets past the Wilma thing and she's like, okay, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go to work. I got to get there. Polly's depending on me because she's been just sitting in a chair cradling this glass since she got it. She gets a little ways down the block and thinks, did I lock the front door? I better go check. Goes back, checks it. She hides the glass in this cabinet and locks it with a key. And then she's like, oh, what if I didn't actually lock the cabinet? So she goes back to do that. And she keeps doing this until she finally decides that she simply can't leave. Like, she has to stay. And she calls into work for the first time.
And she spends the entire morning holding the glass in one hand and a butcher knife in the other.
Sitting bolt upright, staring at nothing.
I don't, like, if you had to place money, well, you guys have read this. I don't know who I'm more terrified for.
There's no right answer to that.
We did not mention that these tricks, every time Leland gives one of these special sales, he has them half money, half deed. And so a bunch of characters have been set up to where we know that they're going to be doing something to someone. Mm-hmm. And the last chapter with Hugh Priest ends with him saying pretty soon he's going to play a little trick on that crazy Nettie lady.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So we're just going to have to sit tight and see what these pranks turn out to be. Because I remember a few of them very vividly, but then there are some that they've alluded to, and I'm like, I couldn't for life of me remember. By Friday, the store is full. He's made a number of regular sales, also his special deals, but he only makes the special deals when they're alone. We get kind of another update of like, he sold this to this person who's going to do this. So we have this running tally.
I thought it was cool that he brought the one woman back who bought the vase by telling her he had its twin. And so she started to think about how great it looks on her mantle, but wouldn't it be perfect if there were two? So he gets her alone that way. And I just thought that was kind of crafty.
Yeah.
It's real clever. We spend the rest of the night with Polly and Alan. And this is when we find out that
she's never had an orgasm.
She's never been lifted by her clitoris, jeez, which is, I'm just reading it straight from the book.
Okay.
But we find out what happened to his wife.
So I don't have to follow up the very tragic story with this story about the very weird fingering scene. I got to get this out. Of everything in this book, this weird fingering is the most burned into my brain. And not for the reason you think.
Is weird fingering going to be our episode?
I truly hope not. But who knows? So I read all these Stephen King books in high school. And I kind of got a reputation as being the kid that would read during class instead of paying attention. And so this book in particular, I remember reading in school, in class, surrounded by people. And anytime scenes like this would come up, I would be terrified. It was worse than the scary parts. I would get to these parts and be like, wrap my arms around the book, be in terror that someone would look over and be like, he's doing what to her? So, this scene, Also, I was like 15, so I'm like, he literally, because we haven't even said what he does, he literally lifts her up by the seat of the crotch into the air and holds her there. And she just fucking
Rides
goes
like a
for it.
mechanical bull.
Yeah. And so I'm 15 and I'm like, sexes, huh? You gotta do what now? I don't think I'm that strong.
I need to be near more walls.
Yeah.
Just for perch.
Such a weird
So
scene.
is that why a lot of us Stephen King fans were virgins for so long?
That's why Stephen King fans have a lot of counter space. After having sex, a lot of sex, Alan, they have sex like 4 times
Good
in
for
all
them.
different places of the house. They're having a great time.
Which is even weirder because the first time I read it, I thought she was an old lady. Also,
Ben, your interpretation of that as a teenager has been hands down my most treasured moment on this podcast.
Alan is feeling post-coital guilt about his wife because
now that's an episode.
he moved on what he felt was appropriate. He doesn't feel bad about moving on, but the town's perception and his son's perception, that all weighs on him. And this is when we find out that his wife Annie died in a car accident with their youngest child Todd. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She crashed into a tree, flew through the windshield, tore her arm and leg off.
Ugh.
Then the car exploded, and presumably Todd could have died on impact, or he could have died in the fire.
'Cause he was wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah. It's a very long, and again, we talked about Stephen King writing grief. We don't need any of that extra voice stuff because how long he goes over every possible detail, every possible scenario for what happened. The most logical being they found out in the autopsy she had a brain tumor, which is why she'd been having headaches. Alan feels guilty because he didn't notice she'd been having more and more headaches, didn't notice that she'd been taking medication more and more.
Not just taking more and more medication. They say he finds a bottle of Tylenol that he had just bought, and within a week it was almost empty.
It was like 120 pills.
They say that someone predicted that she had been taking 20 some Tylenol a day.
Mm-hmm.
Even if she hadn't died in the car crash, her liver is dead.
Yeah.
Like, you can't
Maybe like
do
eight a
that.
day.
Yeah.
8 a day.
Even that is too much Tylenol.
I had to do that on my surgery for like 2 months.
Yeah.
It sucked.
It's
Yeah. And
frightening.
he blames himself because he was still going through everything that he went through with Thad from the dark half.
And I love that they pull that in and use that as part of his story in regards to his wife and son, because you do think like, and you never see the fallout of that. And this awesome character that we get just, glimpses of in the dark half. And then we find out how he was impacted by a crazy event.
Yeah.
How he's tried to have a normal life after seeing that guy pecked apart by sparrows.
Yeah, did you guys buy that at all? Because this was like not that long after the events of the dark half. And he says like he was struggling and trying his best to hold on to his sanity.
And if he saw sparrows, he would scream almost.
I don't know. I just have a hard time. He must be the most fucking mentally stable human being on the planet. Because I feel like I would be a little more than kinda distracted.
Yeah. Well, this chapter ends in such an amazing way.
Oh,
He goes to sleep.
yes.
And we're revisited by George Stark. He has the exact same dream Thad had, where he doesn't see George, but he feels him behind him, and that high-toned son of a bitch welcomes him to Ensville. Oh God!
I love a dream sequence. I'm on record as saying that. And the second where he's like, he's in this store that went on, and they had everything you could ever imagine. But then he felt someone standing right behind him he couldn't see. goosebumps immediately. I was like, so cool.
I hate that I read this book before I read The Dark Half. Now, I missed out on so much the first time through.
Yeah.
Question for you. I wondered while reading this, because to me, it just tickled me. It's like, oh man, I know exactly what this is referencing, and it reminded me of our conversation through The Outsider. How did you feel about that, reading those out of order? At the time, did that stand out as what the heck is this? Or did it kind of fit? Because I felt like it was more graceful, but then I'm like, am I a hypocrite? Do I just feel like it was more graceful because I'm familiar with it?
It felt just like this ominous. I mean, I knew that it was the last Castle Rock book, and so I knew that there was tons of references I wasn't going to get. So I knew that this was just one of those, and gave me enough information, and it just gave me the ominous tone enough. Like, I never would have guessed that it was George Stark. Like,
Yeah.
that was just like a creepy ghost thing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us next time where we will be reading through Chapter 11. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham, I'm CM Alexander, reminding you, the world is full of needy people who don't understand that everything is for sale, if you're willing to pay the price. Hey everyone, Sam Alexander here. Thank you for listening to part 1 of Needful Things. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Joel Jones for his Patreon selection of this book. We are having an awesome time reading it. As always, you can find us on social media at Derry Public Radio and send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. And please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. This really helps to keep us up in the charts, and we appreciate your reviews so much. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.